Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. I am Dave Biddle. I'll be joined by Steve Helwagen and Patrick Murphy in just a moment. Before we do that, I'm going to let you guys know about our newest sponsor of the show, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money on sports action. Over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You think Jamar Chase will get more than 83.5 receiving yards next week, or Nick Chubb will run for more than 55.5 yards? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code BUCKNUTS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prize Picks app today, and use code BUCKNUTS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, gents. Let's bring Steve in. Let's bring Pat in. Hello, fellas.
Hey, what's going on?
Long time no see. Joking. Actually, I didn't see you yesterday, Steve. You had a little issue with the car, but you still were getting work done. I did see Pat, feels like just yesterday, because it was just yesterday. Let's start with, if you had told me before the press conference yesterday, which is one of the more interesting press conferences I've covered, if you had told me before the press conference, Ryan Day is going to get asked directly about Nick Saban saying the pass rush is antiquated, how will he answer that? And I'll say, well, even if he agrees, he'd probably talk around and say, no, it's not antiquated. We have to be better, but it's not antiquated. Instead, he's asked that directly, and great question. And he says, yeah, I agree, because it's not working. So, yeah, he is accurate. I mean, I did not expect that, Steve Helwagen.
Yeah, I obviously missed the press conference. I had a tire blowout on the side of the road as I was on my way there, and it took a little longer to get it fixed than I was hoping, so I completely missed it. But I did end up writing about it later on and listened to it while I was there on the side of the road and sifting through the transcript and everything else. He could not deny what we all saw with our own two eyes, that it's just dysfunctional and it's not working. And obviously, it was good enough to get them through Iowa and Michigan State and the other three tomato cans that they played. But, you get in there against, a top 10 team, which is currently the number one team in the country in Oregon, and it wasn't good enough. And so your aspiration is to beat those teams and to be as good as those teams or better. And the one area that, one of the areas where you were proven deficient is obviously in the pass rush, because Dillon Gabriel, great player. Let's not take anything away from him. I think even a very good pass rush would have had a problem with Dillon Gabriel because he's so slippery and has good pocket presence. My goodness, he's played over 50 games in his college career. So, this isn't a guy in his first day or anything that you can get after. It's amazing. They're going to go from Gabriel to Raiola in the next game, and he's only got these 7 games under his belt that he's played. But it will be a contrast to see how the rookie can handle, this environment coming into Ohio Stadium. But, to me, I think it was very telling that Ryan Day is exasperated. He realizes that, you've assembled this team that is supposed to contend to win it all, and they may not win the Big Ten. They may not make the Final Four of the playoff unless they get some things straightened out. So, it's still a promising season, and there's still plenty of time to get things squared away, but they got to get on it.
Patrick Murphy, your thoughts on Ryan Day agreeing with Nick Saban? Again, that surprised me, and but I loved Ryan Day's answers yesterday. I thought he handled it very well. And can they turn antiquated into modern, or at least effective?
They have to. It's as simple as that, right? You can't you can't have somebody like Nick Saban say that. And first of all, I do think it's worth pointing out Nick Saban now in this job with ESPN is watching a lot of games So I think some of what he said, if you actually go back and listen to the full quote, wasn't quite correct. Like, he talked about simulated pressure. Ohio State does a lot of that. But point being, overall, Nick Saban and Ryan Day agreed, has a point here. And this is one of the best defensive coaches we've ever seen in this sport, one of the best head coaches we've ever seen in the sport. So you don't want him talking about your team like that, even if the nuances are not correct. I think you have to go out and get some of this fixed. What that means, I think, is going to be interesting to see some on Saturday against Nebraska, but I think really in 2 weeks when you go and face Penn State and a new look offense under a new offensive coordinator, what Ohio State does up front. I don't expect it to be wholesale changes. I don't expect all of a sudden to see the snap counts for the starting 4 defensive linemen to change a ton, maybe some. I don't expect the linebackers to be doing things significantly different, but the simple things like stunts, twists, not just rushing 4 all the time, those type of things that we've seen. Larry Johnson has been very successful doing this throughout his career, but times change, players change. I saw highlights of Chase Young recently, and I thought back to you just let that guy go, right? Well, there isn't a Chase Young on this team to just let that guy go and kind of take care of the work for you. You have to do some different things. So it'll be very interesting to hear from whoever we get, assuming we get a defensive coach after the game, kind of on what this week has looked like the last 2 weeks. Also, how much does the Ryan Day affect? He's known as being an offensive coach, right? But he says he's spending more time with the defense over the last week. How much does that play a part in the defense overall, and maybe some different things we see?
Yeah, I wonder if this can be corrected. I mean, they definitely have the talent. And Ryan Day was asked directly. Steve, we'll go to you. We'll get Patrick's thoughts on this as well. Another direct question, a great question. Is there a disconnect between you and Larry Johnson? Now, I would have predicted, I even talked about that. I'm like, if he gets asked about that, he's not going to air the dirty laundry that, yeah, there is a disconnect. I tend to think there is. He said, no, they're on the same page. He did explain that when we're in the room talking, and Dave also mentioned that he's been personally more involved with the defense than ever before. I'm not exactly sure what that entails. He says, when we're in the room talking, there can be disagreements, obviously, about what we're going to do. When we leave the room, we all have to be on the same page. And he says they are. Are you buying that? And what do you just make of the whole Larry Johnson, Jim Knowles discussion, Steve?
Well, this has been ongoing for 3 years. And,
Right.
You thought after Michigan in 2022 that they got everything figured out. And 2023, by and large, was so much better defensively, although they played some of the worst defenses in college or worst offenses in college football last year, and Michigan finally clipped them for 30 points there at the end of the season. So, a lot of the big play problems were resolved. And, the big play problems start up front. When you don't generate pressure and you allow the quarterback to have time, he can have the time he needs to throw the ball over the defense. I didn't hear any questions yesterday about some of the play calling on defense, which was definitely questionable. I mean, there were so many questions that you could ask, but they even asked about pulling Burke and playing some other players and different things like that, which was pretty telling as well. But it's obvious there's some kind of issue here, and again, I don't know why it's festered to this point. I just don't understand why it has gotten to this point. And when you're losing one big game after another, there's got to be a root cause to this. And, they absolutely have got to get this straightened out. That's all there is to it. Or they're all going to be out of jobs. I mean, that's just kind of the way of the world. You have a new athletic director and a new president. I'm not sitting here advocating that Ryan Day should lose his job. Certainly not. But, coming up in a week and a half, they're going to play Penn State on the road. Goodness, I'm struggling. Penn State is probably going to be number 3, number 2, whatever they are in the polls. And I mean, they have a tough game this week at Wisconsin. So that's going to be a tough one for them to get by. And that may take some starch out of Penn State. coming back home, excuse me, to play Ohio State. But man, when that game is done, one of these two things is going to be true. James Franklin is either going to be 1-10 in his career against Ohio State with a loss, or Ryan Day is going to be 2-7 against top 5 teams in his career with a loss. So take one of those two things. Neither one of them coaches wants to be saddled with that record. So that's going to be a death match, I guarantee you, in a week, because if there's one team on Penn State's schedule that they need to beat and have to beat, it's Ohio State. And Ohio State's walking into a bit of a hornet's nest there next week. Even though the game's at noon, it's still going to be a very difficult place to play. So Ohio State's got to get with the program here. The moving sidewalk is ending. Look down, because some stuff could happen in the next several weeks that people aren't going to like if they don't.
Patrick, what are your thoughts on the whole Larry Johnson, Jim Knowles discussion?
Yeah, you and I talked about it a little bit yesterday, Dave, after the press conferences, but like clearly at the very minimum, there's a philosophical difference between what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about how well they agree or disagree. I don't think that really matters, in terms of them as humans for this discussion, because we're talking football, right? And you can have differences as long as you come together, as Ryan Day said, and have success on Saturdays. They've been able to get by, as Steve pointed out last year, with playing some middling offenses and whatnot. And there was more production from the defensive line, but it still wasn't great given the talent you have. So it's interesting that it's taken this long, taken this type of performance to get Ryan Day to address it. Maybe it's just because it hasn't been asked before. But clearly there are differences. Jim Knowles came here with the jack and not using 4 defensive linemen all the time. Larry Johnson has been very successful by using 4 defensive linemen and rushing the way that he has. So whether the decision is made, Ryan Day said the decision was made a long time ago that because of their personnel and the way they recruit, they're going to stick with 4 defensive linemen most of the time. That doesn't mean you need to do it all the time. You don't have to be in your base all the time. There needs to be a happy medium that they come to that leads to success. And that's all that matters. The two guys, if they hate each other outside of the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, fine. It doesn't matter as long as the Buckeyes are winning. People work with people they don't like all the time, but as long as you get results, no one notices, no one cares. So that's really what it comes down to is finding the right balance on the field to get pressure on quarterbacks and to have success overall as a defense.
All right, we'll go to Patrick again on this real quick. If Lathan Ransom is banged up, and Coach Day stopped short of saying that he is, but it was ominous the way he answered that question, because he's like, it was asked if Lathan's dealing with an injury, and he said, we're not going to talk anymore about injuries. So read into that as you will. As we talked yesterday on Instant Reaction, my takeaway from that, if I had to guess, that means he is injured, but it's not season ending. And I don't know. There's a lot of middle ground there. I get that, but that's just my take on it. Okay, so let's say Lathan is out. Who's the next man up at safety in your opinion, Patrick? He mentioned about 4 different guys. Yeah,
so I would probably stick with some of the guys they've used already. I know Malik Hartford and Jalen McClain have both been had positive moments, be it in practice or on the field. Malik Hartford, obviously, with all the buzz he had early last season. But if you can move Jordan Hancock, for instance, back and feel comfortable with that, I just don't know if you need to be adding new pieces in to the mix. Obviously, that would take him out of the nickel spot. But then, could you use Sonny Styles there in the matter we saw him last year? Lorenzo Styles, Sonny's brother, who's practiced there, played a little bit.
Jermaine Matthews.
Yeah, Jermaine Matthews could play there. We saw that during fall camp. So you have options there. And Ryan Day said they feel like they have more depth at corner than they do at safety. And I'm including that nickelback spot as a corner in this situation. I think moving pieces around that way and kind of still keeping with a lot of the guys that have played, unless you've seen in practice, and I wish we get to watch practice, but unless you've seen something of Malik Hartford that's like, hey, this guy is ready to go. Because the offenses, while not great on paper, they will be challenging the rest of the way. You've got this Nebraska team with Dylan Raiola, who will probably want to prove a point, especially after what we saw against Indiana last week. You've got this Penn State offense with a new offensive coordinator that's been rather innovative so far this season. You've got Indiana coming in down the road. So we don't know if and how long Lathan Ransom will be out. But again, I don't know if I would tweak too much if you can avoid it. And, fortunately they had this off week. If Lathan Ransom was hurt, we don't know when it happened, but hopefully they had time to experiment with some things and see what works best.
Steve, when you listened to that quote from Coach, I know you listened to it on radio and then went back and read the whole transcript. Did you get that same feeling that it sounds like Lathan is probably banged up? And if so, who do you expect to be in there?
Yeah, I would have thought if he was healthy, he would have just said, oh, he's okay. So kind of tipped his hand on that one. Maybe not trying to give Nebraska or whoever an idea that, how long he could be out. I don't know. But, I don't know what to really think about that. They have a lot of options, just like with the offensive line situation now that Josh Simmons is done for the year. They're going to start out with Zen Michalski over there. And, but they are rotating some other people at different positions to kind of fill the gap, fill the void over there. In terms of safety, I don't really care. I don't see enough of practice to make a value judgment to say that Jalen McLean is better than Malik Hartford, is better than Jordan Hancock there, is better than Jermaine Matthews, is better than Sonny Styles back there. So as Pat made a good point, I mean, we know Sonny can play safety if he had to. So, and then you could put Arvell Reese. Does that make the defense better? Some would argue perhaps it does. So I don't know how they're going to go. Oh, I didn't mention Lorenzo Styles too, I guess. But, so you got 5 or 6 options, and they'll work through all of them this week in practice, I'm sure, and we'll go with the one that they feel on Saturday gives them the best chance. And hopefully this game gets out of hand just like the Nebraska-Indiana game got out of hand. I wrote in my first look column that I was in Phoenix for the week, so it's 9 a.m. Pacific time, which, people out west always tell you it's great to wake up and there's football on television. And have to say, I rolled over at 9:03, put on my slippers, went out, sat down in front of the TV, and I'm turning on the Nebraska-Indiana game. I got my notepad out. I'm ready to write down some Nebraska stuff. Here we go. And all I saw was Indiana beat that ass. And I was like, whoa. That's coming up in a few weeks, and I got nothing out of that for Nebraska other than Raiola. Despite how bad that game was going, that kid still threw some frozen ropes, and you could see why he's special, although, his turnovers, their turnovers also factored heavily in that. So you want to see Ohio State. If there was a game on the schedule, as Ryan Day likes to say, it's not about, the opponent, it's about us. This is about us because they have to get their shit straight and they have to come out and not meander around and play with their food. They need to do what Indiana did to Nebraska. I think that would be something that would get everybody's attention and say, okay, they're back on the right track. They're going in the right direction headed to Penn State.
Steve mentioned Zen Michalski taking over at left tackle. We're going to get into that in just a moment. I'm also curious. I'm going to get the boys' thoughts on the downfield passing game for Ohio State. Ryan Day was asked about it yesterday. Will Howard was asked about it yesterday. So we're going to get into some offensive topics after our next read here. Guys, if you're looking for a healthier way to enjoy a carefree moment, you have to give cornbread hemp a try. They've created the first ever USDA organic THC gummy that's 100% legal for anyone 21 and above. Cornbread's gummies have 10 milligrams of THC per gummy for just the right dose, perfect for taking the edge off without making you feel anxious or paranoid like other cannabis edibles. Furthermore, cornbread does not use any synthetic ingredients at all. Again, if you're looking for a healthier way to enjoy a carefree moment, you have to give cornbread hemp a try. They've created the first ever USDA organic THC gummy that's 100% legal. As a special offer for Bucknuts Morning 5 listeners, you can get 30% off your first order. Just visit cornbreadhemp.com/bucknuts and use promo code Bucknuts at checkout. Again, that's cornbreadhemp.com/bucknuts and use code Bucknuts for 30% off your first order. Cheers to a healthier happy hour. have to get them on the happy hour hosted by the famous Patrick Murphy. All right, cornbread hemp. All right, smooth transition from cornbread hemp to Zen Michalski. Everything Zen. What do we expect out of Zen Michalski at left tackle, Patrick?
That is, at least if we're talking offensively, probably the biggest question going into Saturday against Nebraska. I just did a radio hit and we talked about it. I think that he came in and answered the bell, at least to a good degree. I don't know if it was perfect. It certainly wasn't perfect in a tough situation against Oregon. Now with a week plus, 2 weeks, I guess, to prepare as the starter, a guy who is now in his, I think, 4th year of college football, though he hasn't played a ton. Like, you expect him to maintain the standard. Obviously, he won't be the same as Josh Simmons, or he probably would have been playing. But I think you need to just see more of the same. If you can just be quiet, if we come out of that game and we're not talking about Zen Michalski making a mistake or two, which I thought, after the Oregon game, now there was a lot to talk about, but we didn't talk about him. You go back and look at the film. Yeah, he had some plays. I think the biggest benefit for him will be Will Howard's ability to move in the pocket. We saw that against Oregon at times when pressure did come. He's able to kind of avoid some of the errors that maybe some of the quarterbacks recently for Ohio State would have made if the offensive line makes errors. So I think it's going to be an interesting first test for Zen. Obviously, the bigger test will come in a week's time, a week and a half's time, against Abdul Carter and that Penn State defensive line. But I do you got thrown into the fire. Then you had a week off to kind of prepare. I assume he got more reps than a lot of the starters did over this last week. Yeah. Now you get a game like Nebraska, which will be a challenge, but not the biggest challenge. And then you work your way into Penn State. So look, this offensive line has to play well. We've said it all. We said all offseason. We said now that doesn't change just because you lost a guy. You talked about depth. You talked about having guys ready. Ryan Day, I was asked yesterday about when guys were sick during fall camp on the offensive line and other guys getting more reps. All of that needs to come together right now as you face injuries. This is what you prepared for. Zen Michalski, has to be ready to go. And again, based on the small sample size against Oregon, I think you can at least have a positive outlook going into Saturday's game.
Steve, I want to get your thoughts on that. Also, let's switch gears and also get into the downfield passing attack. Coach Day talked about that. He said it has to be better, and he didn't shy away from it. Obviously, I mean, it's almost non-existent right now. Will Howard is much more optimistic. He's like, we just haven't had to use it, so we really haven't done it. And teams are also scared we're going to beat them over the top. So they have 2 safeties back a lot, so we've been able to hit. And he's right. They've been a very effective passing offense, but to achieve their goals, to beat Penn State, to then win the Big Ten, to then maybe win the national championship, they need to have some type of downfield passing attack. What did you make of what Coach Day and Will Howard said, Steve?
Yeah, I think they're continuing to work on it. And like Coach Day said, they're going to go and put some balls up in the air and see what happens. And Will Howard said, hey, I'm all for that too. Let's try it. Maybe this is one of Howard's failings as a quarterback, is that this is just not his forte, that he doesn't have the ability. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, they have hit a few, but again, they've been plays where, the receiver has gotten behind the defense and then has to hold up and wait to catch the ball, like I think the one against Oregon was. So, I mean, it would be great if you could throw a few 40-yard passes every game. And certainly Oregon displayed how the game changes very quickly when you hit 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 7, 8 of those big chunk plays. God, that was Michigan. I had PTSD watching that game from Michigan 2022. It was just so pathetic. I don't even know what to say, but I thought we'd gotten past that. So at any rate, yeah, I do believe that this is something that's going to be an ongoing thing for them that they've got to get ironed out. And they've got the dudes to get behind the defense, believe me. And now they need to complete a few of those throws.
Yeah, Patrick, as you mentioned and Steve mentioned, we don't get to see as much practice as we want, meaning we don't get to see any practice at all once the season starts. They were pretty good to us during camp, I thought, overall. Not quite like it was way back in the day when I first got on the beat and every practice was open. Steve remembers those days. Jim Tressel, my first year on the beat, We would interview him after practice every day. Every practice was open. So we don't get to see these practices, but we did see during the season, but we did see Will Howard throw the ball down the field during camp. And my takeaway was he doesn't have a cannon. It's not his forte, but he can make throws 50 yards down the field. We just haven't seen him do it. He's confident he can do it. What do you remember seeing from Will Howard as far as downfield passing? And do you think they can get this where it's not a strength, they're not going to major in it, but they can at least be effective at it at some points?
I think you hit it right on the head there. Will Howard can do it. It's not his strongest attribute, which is interesting because a guy built the way he is, you would think he could really launch them. As Ryan Day said, we're going to launch balls today was how he answered about that. I don't know if they really did or not in practice yesterday, but look, I think Steve brought it up. A lot of the times, the few times that we've seen Will Howard take deep shots, they've come up a little short on the passes. The one counter example was, I think it was the Iowa game. He overthrew Jeremiah Smith in the end zone. It was an incomplete pass. And, I almost would rather see that. At least then you are putting it out for the guy to go make a play. Now, obviously, if he does have to slow up and he catches it and it's a 40, 50-yard gain, you're certainly going to take that. I think the arm talent, the power in his throws is there. It's just a matter of accuracy. It's also a matter of, is it there? And Will Howard talked about that a little bit yesterday as well. If teams are putting, guys back, you're not going to take those deep shots, right? So you do have to establish the run to get the box a bit more loaded, to then be able to take some of those deep shots to, Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, whoever it may be. So it's a combination of things, right? It's not just can Will Howard do it? It's can you get into the right situation to then take those shots? Oregon was obviously able to do that, got one-on-one matchups on the outside without safety help and made Ohio State pay for that. Now can Ohio State do the same? And look, Ohio State still made big plays, right? They've been able to, turn short passes into big gains and things like that. Not as much against Oregon. But I do think if that opportunity presents itself, you'd love to see a few of those hit on Saturday against Nebraska.
We'll get you guys out of here on this. Thoughts on the Nebraska game? Pretty hefty point spread, 25.5. Last time I looked at it, I didn't check this morning, but I think it's like a 25.5. Pretty hefty point spread there. Nebraska's going to come in here with nothing to lose, coming off an embarrassing performance, even though Indiana's a really good team. 56-7, like, geez. This is still the best Nebraska team they've had in a while. Matt Rule, I think, is a good coach, despite what happened last week. Yeah, he was a failure in the NFL, but the list of college coaches that are good that were bad NFL coaches is long. Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, Steve Spurrier, we could go on and on and on. There are exceptions to the rule, like Pete Carroll. But I think this Nebraska team's probably, maybe more dangerous than I expected because they're just going to come in here with nothing to lose. Then again, Ohio State's coming off a bye. They're hungry. They're ticked off. So, Steve, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on this Nebraska game? You think that Ohio State's going to blow them out? You think this could be tight, somewhere in between?
Well, I think it comes down to if Ohio State can force the same turnovers that Indiana forced last week. I think Raiola threw 3 interceptions. I think they had 5 turnovers in the game. And if Ohio State can get 3 turnovers, then yeah, there's no reason why this can't be a blowout for Ohio State. The Buckeyes need to come back and play a really solid game and look. None of this, we were off for a week, so we're sluggish crap, all these stupid things that people bring up. No. It's time to put the money on the table. The real games are starting and have started. The real games have started, and either you are or you're not. And, I would think Nebraska will play better than they did last week. I mean, you couldn't possibly play any worse, but they're going from the frying pan at Indiana into the fire, theoretically, at Ohio State. So, again, this Ohio State's got to play a strong game on Saturday just for momentum's sake going into Penn State. If there are still questions lingering after this game and you're going to Penn State the following week, I mean, I don't even know what to make of that.
Steve, good stuff, buddy. I appreciate it. We'll get you out of here. Thanks, man.
All right.
Take care. Steve Helwagen, there he goes. We'll hear from him on what we learned live after the Nebraska game. We'll also hear from Patrick Murphy. Patrick, close the show out for us, man. What do you expect from this Nebraska game? Is it should Ohio State have any worries here, or you think they're going to cruise?
I think this will be a good bounce back performance from the Buckeyes. Look, I see it in the comments. We see it on the front row. I've seen it on Twitter. It's the big games, right? It's the top 5 games that everyone's concerned about. This is not a top 5 game. You mentioned Nebraska has some talent. It's a good Nebraska team. You mentioned Matt Rule. All of these things are true. But Ohio State at home, coming off a bye week, I expect to handle things. I honestly, this can be taken as a good or bad, depending on your perspective. But I think we come out of that game not feeling like we learned a ton, because I think Ohio State is just a better team. And we've seen what they do against better teams. I imagine it'll look similar to Iowa or whatnot. I think the Buckeyes do need to be careful that it is an angry Nebraska team, but I also think, as Steve was pointing out, you can take some of what Indiana was able to do and use that. So I think it'll be a comfortable win for Ohio State, and we'll be asking similar questions, not because the Buckeyes didn't execute their job, but because it just was a relatively comfortable win as you head into Penn State in a week's time.
All right, great stuff, boys. I appreciate it.
All right.
Patrick Murphy. Thank you, Patrick Murphy, and thank you, Steve Helwagen. All right, great stuff from those guys. Appreciate them doing it. Something we did last year during the season, I would bug Patrick and Steve to join me sometimes on the Wednesday show. We'll try and do more of that. The 3-man backfield here. So really appreciate Patrick's knowledge, Steve's wisdom. So thanks to those guys. Thanks to all of you. We have a big audience here in our live show. Thanks to everybody who's listening to the podcast only version. Really appreciate you guys. If you're watching on YouTube, you're not subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. All that stuff helps. If you're whatever platform you're listening on, if you can give us a review or give us 5 stars, like on Apple Podcasts, all that stuff helps. Really appreciate you guys. If you like the show, subscribe, give us a 5-star review. All that stuff really helps. So again, thanks to Patrick, thanks to Steve, thanks to all of you. I appreciate it. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day. All right, and if you're still with me, I'm going to let you guys know about our friends at Mando. Love Mando. I'm sure you've heard me talk about Mando whole body deodorant at this point. It's a great product, and I highly recommend it to you guys. If you're like I was and you've been using the same deodorant for a long time, it might be time to try something different and better. Mando was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. Mando is American-made. It controls odor for up to 72 hours. Mando Starter Pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant. That's what this is. 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. Luckily, I have a discount code to help you get hooked on my new favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code Bucknuts at shopmando.com. shopmando.com. Highly recommend it. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you guys so much. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Go Bucks.